Hello everyone and welcome to the April edition of EdTech Monday Kenya. This is a show that leverages on technology to advance education and learning. My name is Doreen Biira. On this month's edition of EdTech Monday Kenya, we're focusing on access to quality education. Can technology fill the gaps? Now, in the year 2002, Kenya rolled out what is now free primary education, and almost 2 decades later, primary school enrollment and attendance has improved vastly. The number of enrolled primary school pupils making it to the final grade has also risen from 70% in the early 2000s to about 93% today. Ensuring that most students make it into primary school and stay in school long enough to reach the last grade of primary school is crucial to increasing the pool of students who advance to successive levels. By successive levels, we're talking about secondary school and tertiary institutions or college and university. Even with a substantial increase in the number of children with access to basic education, a large number still remain out of school, which is why we're asking today, do you think technology can fill the gaps in accessing quality education in Kenya? I've got great panelists with me today here to discuss this with me. Shiraz Chakera is the education specialist, UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa region, and Mike Kipkorir Bill is the founder and CEO for Verb Education. Jennifer Otieno is the CEO, Edu Design, and co-founder, EdTech East Africa. And well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the EdTech Monday Kenya show, and I'm so honored to have you on the show today. I'm going to start with Shiraz. Education in Kenya today is undoubtedly more accessible than it was before, but there is a common problem: quality. What are your thoughts on this?
As you mentioned, quality is a challenge whereby many children are not gaining basic skills and the skills that are needed for their future. There are huge issues in Kenya related to inequity, where many swathes of children, particularly those outside of urban areas, are not accessing quality education. There are still hundreds of thousands of children who are not completing their basic primary education, and there is massive room for improvement in efficiency. And those are problems that existed before the COVID pandemic and the crisis that led to in the education system. So there are many challenges, and we need to be looking towards ensuring that those challenges have a laser-eyed focus on quality. But I want to just reflect one thing, that because Kenya is actually, relative to many of its other countries in the region, in a strong position, we in this country really should be looking ambitiously to the future. There's a strong foundation to build upon. And the big question for Kenya is, where does it want to go in the future? What are the leapfrogs it can make with technology? What are the leapfrogs it can make with the investment that has already been made? And I believe, for one, and UNICEF is a strong partner to the government here and others, to ensure that Kenya can really move its education system from a good place to a great place.
Jennifer, I want to come to you as well. Where can technology be most useful in supporting teaching and learning to achieve quality in our schools? Is data personalization a possibility in our systems?
Absolutely. So just to build upon what Shiraz said, we have such an incredible foundation built. But the power that technology can bring to this experience is to make that even stronger. So if we think about the most ideal situation in a classroom. So you have a very well-trained teacher, you have a relatively small class size. Even being able to tailor learning to every individual student in that classroom is a monumental task. But if you add technology into the mix, all of a sudden, you've now empowered the teacher with resources that can make that process even easier. Classrooms that are, serving 50, 60, 70 kids, for teachers that are hungry for more time with their students and being able to allocate their resources effectively, particularly their time, then all of a sudden, the technology gives them the opportunity to do that and to do that more effectively. And what that translates into is actually better learning outcomes for young people who then make sure they don't miss the skills and competencies they need to continue to progress and be successful. Similarly, if we make sure that teachers are empowered with data, not just teachers, but teachers and school leaders are empowered with the data they need, then they can make better decisions about how to serve the children that they are working with and the parents that they serve as a part of their school communities.
Mike, you deal with transforming education delivery. Do you think we're jumping the gun when we say we need technology to fill the gaps in access to quality education, or do you actually think that technology is the blueprint that we need to achieve quality education in Kenya?
I don't think we're jumping the gun. I actually think that technology is the bridge that we need to help us to advance from where we are now into this future. Just look at what has happened with the mobile communication.
Right.
It's literally helped us as a country to take a big leap ahead. Now, when it comes to quality education though, I feel that we need to communicate in the same way across the board. Like, what do we mean by quality education? So there are two big distinctions that I think I can make, that I think I've been trying to make in my work, that I feel helps with the understanding. And the first one is quality of education as the bare minimum as required by government. So there are those standards that government sets for, like this is the student-teacher ratio, this is the amount of time a lesson should take, etc. Fulfilling those helps us to, have one level of education. The other level is very similar to what Shiraz has pointed out a few times, which is compared to other countries, Kenya is doing. Compared to Kenya is, I think that's the other level of quality. The other level of quality is compared to the others, how are we faring on across very many aspects. So you could find, for example, on one aspect of education, Kenya is doing very, very well. On another aspect, maybe not so well. So that's I think the thing about quality education that I wanted to highlight. So are we jumping the gun then when we're using technology to try and improve the quality of education? The answer is no.
And in this case, I would say you believe that technology is the blueprint that we need to achieve quality education. Is it the only blueprint?
I wouldn't call it a blueprint. I would call it a tool.
Right.
I think it's a very important tool. So the digital technologies that we use right now, I think it's a very important tool at this point, not necessarily the blueprint, because we must be able to believe in ourselves, to pull off education and to continue educating our people in line with certain beliefs we have about what the future should be and how we should go, and then use whatever convenient tool at the time. So right now, digital technologies are indeed a very good tool, to the point that, you see the way we say Google something instead of search for something on the internet. So yeah, in a way, we could even call technology a blueprint, but it's not the blueprint that way. It's a very useful tool.
Right. Shiraz, and I want to come back to you because, we're looking at the teacher to student and student to classroom ratios as some of the underlying learning challenges, in addition to other factors, of course, like infrastructure and so on and so forth. But what workable improvements can be implemented to improve the quality of education in the country today?
So one of the things to address this, and this is a very powerful thing to focus on quality, is to ensure that we distribute teachers, quality teachers across the country, so that all students have equal access to teachers, to good teachers. So you don't have a situation that in rural areas there are 3 times as many kids in the class than there are in urban areas. And the disparity is not simply rural and urban, it's across many different dimensions. And then we need to therefore implement systems that can incentivize teachers to go to more challenging areas, challenging for them because perhaps it's away from their families, but are critical if we're going to ensure that all children have access to teachers and good resources. But that is going to take time. It's important to start that now. The business of knowing where teachers are and encouraging them to be distributed across the country and across schools. But there are things that we can also explore as those systems are put in place. Technological improvements such as instituting masterclass systems so that where a teacher is with 50, 60 kids, they are supported by excellent teachers based, let's say, in Nairobi or anywhere in the world. And we've got examples from around the world where that has worked quite well for more rural settings, where it's harder to get more teachers at. You can do amazing work to support teachers who are more remote through blended training for them so that they can access the latest expertise to improve their pedagogy. But technology is not always the answer. As Mike said, it's not the blueprint, it's a tool for us to use. And so also we want to, in those contexts where we want to improve quality quickly in communities, so in schools that serve marginalised communities where there's a very high teacher-pupil ratio, we also want to activate parents, community members and other members of the community to be part of learning so that we can ensure that those learners get the expertise that every community can bring into a school.
Okay, and Jennifer, education is a natural fit for technology because the technology offers ways to enhance and improve learning. But then again, are we in Kenya utilizing these tools, the available technology models for learning as much as we should, or they just might be some hurdles in between there?
Now, to echo what others have said, we believe that that education workforce is critical and core to these learning experiences. So no one's saying that education technology should replace them. Instead, what it can do is actually enhance the power of those individuals. What we need, though, is for people to understand how do they find really great quality education tools and resources. What do they need to do to change about their learning environments to actually adapt to those new learning environments? How do we empower a teacher with the skills to use them effectively? With school leaders, how do we change their perceptions around purchasing power? And instead of just making investments in more traditional infrastructure, things like that, how do we actually get them to see the value of education tools that are digital and can really drive towards greater sustainability, greater learning outcomes? Acumen East Africa recently did some research that highlighted the desire of all of these groups, school leaders, teachers, parents, to really have access to more of these great digital learning tools. The problem, though, is that there isn't a lot of information for them on what's the return on that investment. How do I find the right resources? So there's still a lot that needs to be done at multiple levels within our education community to help people understand where do they go and how do they use them most effectively.
Mike, the biggest impact that technology has on education is how it challenges the foundation of learning, not just for the younger children, but also at all levels, really. And are the educators on track? Because you deal a lot with these educators. Are they on track, or do you think that there's a bit of a disconnect? How do we align the learners' critical thinking enabled by technology to the educators' skills themselves?
If you look at the early childhood education sector,
right.
Basic education, primary school, basic education, secondary school, technical and vocational, and then university level, the challenges in there are very many. And it's one thing to speak about the expertise of the educator, the teacher. It's another thing to consider what this teacher has to work with. By this I mean the system. So, is the system of education promoting these critical thinking skills, these communication 21st century skills that we're speaking about, or is the system promoting passing the exam later on? Okay? So whatever the system is promoting, or put it another way, whatever the system is measuring, the yardstick by which we measure our teachers, our learners, chances are that's where the behavior is going to go towards. Okay? So if we want to see critical thinking, but we do not reward that, then it's very difficult. Now, I must say something about the competency-based curriculum, CBC, the one that we are calling it new. I think we're in the 4th, 5th year or something like that. I feel it's going a long way in terms of moving the measurement away from just passing the exam into now more of developing all these other skills. I feel that it's genuinely going in that direction. So what we now need is this training and the tools for the teachers in the schools so that they can actually sustain it. Because one of the biggest complaints about CBC is that it's very involving for the teachers. It's a lot of work for the teachers. And if we don't support them by giving them the right training and the right tools, digital tools in this case would be an excellent opportunity to really help to enable these teachers do more based on what's required of them. You know, if we are able to provide them with the right training and the right tools, then I think that we can now start having these expectations out of these teachers and therefore the learners and therefore the education system as a whole. And I must mention that we are speaking about the formal education system here. And very often we get blindsided by the informal education system. So by this I mean we are speaking about this and focusing on what we need to do in our schools, and then we exclude a certain group of people who go ahead and teach themselves and learn by themselves, and suddenly they're the ones driving the agenda in industry and in the way things are being done.
Jennifer, quality education means preparing learners for development in the 21st century, and that is also their skills that need development. How can EdTech play a role in paving the way for this? Because the skills or the demand for skills now is different from what any other successive person who has gone through an education system was required to have, say, a decade ago or 2 decades ago. So how do we ensure that EdTech is playing the rightful role to prepare our learners at successive levels for the skills in the job market?
Yeah, it's very true. So we're seeing now that the world is going to be changing at an incredible pace. We know that learners are, even after they complete their learning in primary, secondary, and even tertiary, they're going to need to keep learning for the rest of their lives. So the most important skills that we can empower them with are the ability to self-teach, to learn. So we need to help them understand what does actual learning look like, and what are the expectations around learning. As Mike said, you know, CBC is taking us in the right direction. So it's creating that blueprint for what are the really important competencies, particularly around 21st century skills, that young people need to learn in order to be able to be successful and to practice that craft of learning throughout their lives. But there's still a lot that needs to be done to enhance that. So EdTech tools are fantastic. You know, there are opportunities for young people to explore their problem-solving skills through games. They can practice creativity by telling stories. They can share information with their fellow peers and learners. There's lots of ways in which they can, you know, cultivate those skills using some of these digital platforms and tools.
All right, it is the tool of the day. But, you know, when we talk about quality education, if we're to get to a point where we have successfully achieved what we have all been talking about, what would the ideal quality education look like for either one of us? I'm going to start with Jennifer.
I think for me, the way that I would see this is an experience that the learner actually gets to drive. So it's not just about being passive as a part of the learning experience, but it's being able to express what you're excited about, find different learning pathways, follow those natural curiosities that we know our learners have, and be able to practice really important skills as they go through those. So both guided learning experiences, some exploratory learning experiences, and of course learning with the people that around them. So learning with their friends and their siblings, learning with their parents and their teachers, experiencing the joy of learning with those who are in their lives. And so being able to have that engaged interactive experience that again draws and drives towards a future where they want to continue learning on an ongoing basis and want to continue to create as well, not just to consume, but really to think about how do I add value? What is the knowledge that I can create and add to this educational experience for others so that they also get to become contributors to that learning experience?
Right, and Mike, what would the ideal quality education scenario look like for you?
I'm going to speak about it from the perspective of how we should organize education, which the first level, as I said, for me is doing things as per the minimum requirements. And the reason I'm insisting on that is because the minimum requirements is what all of us can agree upon collectively. Right. And so that we can pull our resources together and agree that this is our minimum. Then the next thing, of course, becomes what else is happening around the world, what is expected by the world. So, for example, employers expect people to leave school with certain capabilities. Somebody who achieves or meets those expectations, we can say that that person had quality education. So, as per what the world expects, and then thirdly, as per what is suitable in that context, as I said earlier. So the bottom line, in really agreement with what Jen is saying, I think the bottom line is the purpose of education is really to just help an individual to be capable of fulfilling their potential and also to contribute towards the nation, the community that they live in.
All right.
That I think is the bottom line.
Greatly enhanced by the use of technology.
As
all
the
right,
tool.
Shiraz, I'm coming to you. The ideal quality education scenario in a country like Kenya.
Yeah, I love what Jennifer and Mike have already said. I think I love the ideas around, and I think are vital, around the experience for the learner that Jennifer articulated so well. It being joyful, it being about curiosity, it being about growing and gaining skills for themselves now and in the future. I also really appreciated what Mike was saying and fully agree that it's also about results. Results for kids. They need to have the skills at the end of the day, the outcomes that are going to prepare them for the future, not only within Kenya and the world. And I think that's critical. And I think we need to be thinking about all children. I think one of the next big stages for Kenya's education is to ensure that the significant inequities in the system are closed so that we really do ensure that marginalized students gain access to that joyful learning experience that gives them the skills that are going to help them live well, get jobs or set up businesses and innovate for the future. And I also, to add to what they said, have a vision of education being something that communities fully engage with. It not only being about the experience of children through pre-primary, basic, TVET and tertiary, but it being a lifelong activity where you learn and you give. And that if we can open up education, I think, this is EdTech Monday. Technology has the real opportunity to, for many generations, educators have been talking about lifelong education and opening up education, and the opening up and emancipatory power of education. Technology has the power to bring knowledge to more people, connect more people, and if we can really fulfill that vision for communities across this country, I think that is something to dream about.
Amazing. A great discussion we just had here on whether or not technology can fill the gaps in improving the quality of education in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making time to participate in this month's edition of EdTech Monday Kenya. And to everyone who has followed this conversation, let's keep the conversation going as well. And to our sign language interpreter, Rose Omolo, for doing a fantastic job. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. On our next edition of EdTech Monday, we are focusing on the pandemic. Have parents taken any lessons from the pandemic, or has the pandemic changed parents' perception of education technology? That's a question we're going to leave to you to ponder on for now. And until the next one, my name is Doreen Biira. Thank you all for watching, and bye for now.